Today, 5 China words. Wall, emperor, dragon, bamboo, dumpling. Stay and learn with me. I'm in Beijing, China, the oldest city in the world. And today, I walk on the Great Wall.
Ni hao, Sophia. Welcome to China. Ni hao means hello.
Ni hao wei, I have impressive. Ni hao. Chinese is a tonal language.
But your ni hao? Very good.
Ancient red buildings beside glass towers. Traditional lanterns on modern streets.
Beijing has 3,000 years of history, and it is still growing every day.
I can see the wall. It goes over the mountain, the actual Great Wall of China.
This section was built in the Ming Dynasty 600 years ago. Come.
These steps, they are all different sizes. Some are so high.
The wall follows the mountain, so the steps follow the mountain too, up and down.
It goes on forever. Both directions. Forever.
If you walked it every day, it would take months.
Just to walk it, I cannot understand that number. Inside the watchtower, soldiers lived here, on the wall?
Yes, thousands of soldiers lived and died on this wall, protecting China from the north.
A soldier stood here 2,000 years ago and looked at this same view.
The wall connects us to them, through time, through stone.
This stone, it was placed here by a worker 2,000 years ago. His hands' workers built this wall.
One of them rests the wall forever. That is the legend. The wall remembers everyone who built it.
The Great Wall behind me. My friends at home will never believe this.
In China we say, he who has not climbed the Great Wall is not a true man.
Then today I become a true woman. The autumn colors below. Red and gold and orange.
The wall and the forest together.
Autumn is the best season to visit the Great Wall. The colors in the clear sky.
From up here, you can see how the wall follows every mountain perfectly.
No flat ground, no easy path. The wall took the hardest road, always.
The Great Wall. Built by 1 million hands, across 2,000 years, still standing, still beautiful. He is carving it at the table, and the skin is so red, so shiny.
Peking duck, 600 years old. A dish for emperors, now for everyone.
The skin is so crispy, and with the sauce, sweet and savory together.
I understand why emperors loved this. It is extraordinary.
This square is enormous. How big is it?
440,000 square meters.
1 million people. That is impossible to imagine. The red walls, such a vivid red, and the gold golf, it is in Chinese culture means happiness and good fortune.
Gold means power and wealth. Together, the emperor.
It is so big inside and so powerful. Everything
1,999 rooms. Ordinary people were forbidden to enter. That is why Forbidden City.
This is the most important building in China?
The emperor sat in this hall for 600 years. Every important ceremony, every decision about China, from here.
The emperor sat there, on that throne, and decided the fate of millions of people.
24 emperors sat there, from 1420 to 1912. Almost 500 years.
5 bridges, all exactly the same.
Only the center bridge.
Always only the center.
The emperor was always in the center of everything.
Just for a moment. There are animals on the roof, little figures. What are they?
Imperial guardians, they protect the building. More figures, more important the building. This roof has 10 figures, the maximum.
After all that stone and power, a garden, so peaceful.
Even emperors needed peace.
The garden was their private world, away from decisions and duty.
Every morning in China, thousands of people do Tai Chi in the parks.
The movements are so slow and so graceful, like moving water.
Slow, breathe, do not think, just move with the breath. Slow. That is why we practice. Tai Chi teaches the mind only here, only now. Better, you feel it now, the stillness inside the movement.
I do feel it, my mind is quiet. Just this movement, just this moment.
The roof is blue, just like the sky, and it is perfectly round.
Round like heaven. The emperor prayed here every year for a good harvest, for the people of China.
350 kilometers faster than a small plane.
China has the longest high-speed rail network in the world, kilometers of tracks.
40,000, building at full speed. This skyline, it looks like the future.
30 years ago, this was farmland. Today, it is one of the tallest skylines in the world.
All of this in 30 years?
Old Europe buildings on one side, future China towers on the other side.
One river between them, east meets west, old meets new. Here in this river,
118 floors in 60 seconds.
the Shanghai Tower elevator, 18 meters per second, one of the fastest in the world.
I can see the whole city from here, so tiny, and the river.
You can see 60 kilometers from here on a clear day, all the way to the mountains. Xiaolongbao, the most famous Shanghai food, dumplings with soup inside.
Soup inside the dumpling? How do they get the soup inside?
When you cook it, the solid filling melts into soup.
The soup is inside. Two things at once.
That is why it is magic. Every Xiaolongbao is a surprise.
This is my new favorite food in the whole world. Inside the modern city, this ancient garden
Yu means happiness and pleasure in Chinese. This is
is the garden of happiness. Garden of happiness. Yes, that is the signs. All Chinese characters glowing.
Red and gold everywhere. Nanjing Road, 5 kilometers of shops. Shanghai never sleeps here.
Welcome to my tea house. Please sit. We begin slowly.
In China, tea is never rushed.
It is so peaceful here.
The mountains here, they are different, round tops.
Chinese painters have painted these mountains for 2,000 years. They inspired Chinese.
The mountains are in the water.
The Li River is so still in the morning, better than the real mountains sometimes. Look! This mountain! It is on the 20 yuan
The
note.
banknote and the real mountain, they are exactly the same.
If you have a 20 yuan note, you have Guilin in your pocket.
He is using birds to catch fish.
The bird catches for the fisherman. The fisherman feeds the bird.
The mountains are right there, at the end of every street, like walls.
In Yangshuo, you are inside the mountains. They surround you on all sides.
Rice fields, karst mountains.
Blue sky. This is the most beautiful sight in the world. The farmers have grown rice in these fields, together forever.
The rice grows on the side of the mountain, in curves like stairs up to the sky.
Dragon's backbone terraces, built 600 years ago by hand. No machines, just
Her hair, it is so long.
And so black. How long is it?
the Yao women never cut their hair.
China surprises me every single day. The reflection is so perfect.
Chinese people say Guilin scenery is the best on.
Now you understand completely. Best under heaven. Each Chinese character is like a small painting.
This character is Mei. It means beauty.
The whole character in one breath, no stopping.
One stroke builds another, like life.
My me, my beauty character. Is it beautiful?
Your first attempt, it has heart. That is the beginning of beauty.
Fold here, press here. Then fold again, small folds, like pleats on a dress. The dumpling must be sealed.
The pleats, they are... Let us review today's China words together. Repeat after me, together. Repeat after me. Ready? Let us start. Wall. A wall is a barrier. The Great Wall of China is 21,000 kilometers long. The longest wall in the world. Say it. Wall. Emperor. An emperor is the ruler of an empire. China had emperors for 2,000 years. Emperor. 3 parts. Emperor. Dragon. In China, the dragon is a symbol of power and good luck. Not scary, lucky. Dragon. Dragon. Say it with me. Bamboo. Bamboo is a fast-growing plant. China has the most bamboo in the world. Pandas eat bamboo. Bamboo. Bamboo.
Dumpling. A dumpling is dough filled with meat or vegetables. China has hundreds of types of dumplings. Dumpling. Dumpling!
Dynasties. A dynasty is a family of rulers. China had many dynasties for 4,000 years. Ming Dynasty, Tang Dynasty, Qing Dynasty. Dynasty. Chinese phrase. Ni hao. It means hello in Chinese. Say it with me. Ni hao. Now you can say hello in China. Today's China words: wall, emperor, dragon, dumpling, dynasty. 6 words.
plus ni hao. You are ready for China.
Great Wall, Forbidden City, Shanghai, Guilin, tea ceremony, dumplings, Tai Chi. China is not one country, it is 1,000 worlds inside.